Varbanova, vă mulțumesc foarte mult că ați acceptat interviul pentru TVR Moldova. Bineînțeles, agenda UN Women este una foarte importantă pentru Republica Moldova. Dumneavoastră promovați femeile în toate domeniile de activitate. Dacă ați putea să ne vorbiți mai multe despre activitățile pe care le inițiază UN Women în Republica Moldova.
Thank you very much for this invitation. I'm very happy to have this opportunity and talk to you more about UN Women and what we do here in the Republic of Moldova. UN Women is the United Nations agency dedicated to gender equality and women's rights. And here in Moldova we have an office for the past 10 years. We existed before as UNIFEM, but in 2011 the United Nations General Assembly created the newest United Nations agency, and this is UN Women. And UN Women was created because there was a global recognition that still, despite a lot of progress over the past decades that many countries have made, we're still very far from real equality between women and men in all spheres of life. And this is the case everywhere in the world. Unfortunately, to date, there is no country in the world that has reached full equality in political life, in social life, in economic life. And still women, and especially women from particular groups, continue to be more disadvantaged and more marginalized. Moldova is not an exception to this. When we look at the situation here in Moldova, we see a lot of gender gaps on the labor market when it comes to decision-making and leadership positions, including in the security sector. Also, we have high levels of violence against women, unfortunately, in the home and outside of the home. So UN Women is focusing on all of these issues and working in partnership with the government institutions, with civil society sector, with media, academia, but also the citizens of Moldova, both women and men, from all ages, including the young people, to try to change this so that the next generation does not have the same status quo that we have today. We have 3 areas of priority here in Moldova. These are reflected in our new country program for Moldova that we adopted in the beginning of this year. So it covers 2018-2022. And these priorities are, first of all, to support the country to advance the participation of women in decision making, in parliament, at the local level, in government, in business, so in all spheres of life. Secondly, to increase the economic empowerment of women, because women are still more represented in lower paid jobs, they're less active on the labor market, they earn less, they have lower pensions, there is higher rate of poverty among women. So that's our second priority area. And third, last but not least, is to prevent and combat all forms of violence against women and girls. In the home, on the street, in the schools, at the workplaces, gender-based violence can take many forms, and we are working on different forms of gender-based violence. One of our areas is also specifically focusing on the security sector and advancing the Women, Peace and Security agenda in the Republic of Moldova.
Dacă ne referim la agenda de femei, pace și securitate, de ce credeți că acest subiect este important anume pentru Republica Moldova?
18 years ago, the Security Council, which, as you know, is the UN highest body, which is charged to maintain the peace and security in the international world order, adopted a very important resolution, and this is Resolution 1325 on women, peace and security, so that was in 2000. And this resolution of the Security Council for the first time acknowledged that women and men experience conflict differently, and that women have a very important role to play in the prevention of conflict, in the resolution of conflict, in negotiating the peace, and in recovery from conflict after peace has been negotiated. This was a very groundbreaking resolution, because until then this was not really formally recognized, and peace and security were viewed from a different lens. In this period, in the past 18 years, we have seen additional 7 resolutions of the Security Council that have been adopted on the topic of women, peace and security. 4 of these resolutions are focusing on the participation of women in all stages of peace building, peacemaking, recovery. And 4 are focused on prevention and combating of sexual violence during conflict. So the fact that there has been an explosion of Security Council resolutions on this topic really shows that the international community has put very big focus and very big emphasis on bringing women as important agents of change in processes related to peace. What is exceptional, I would say, about this resolution and why it is relevant to countries like Moldova is that it makes us reconsider what is peace and what is security. I think that decades ago we understood peace as absence of war, absence of armed conflict. But today our understanding of peace is much broader. By peace, we don't just mean absence of war, we mean having inclusive political processes, we mean justice and reconciliation, we mean human rights in the society that has experienced conflict. We also have to reconsider what is security. Security also used to mean absence of violence, but now security has political implications, economic, social dimensions. We talk about security at home, we talk about security in the community. And when you take these broader views of peace and security, previously maybe women were not considered important agents in this discussion, but now we have to recognize that half of the world's population has to be included and has to make decisions in how we maintain peace, how we sustain peace, and how we ensure this kind of security for the entire population. So that's what the resolution did. It broadened the understanding of peace and security, and it said women are not just victims, they're not passive, let's say, citizens, but they're active agents of change, and then they have an important perspective that needs to be brought in all security and peace-related processes. The resolution has, I think, taken different shapes in different countries. Countries have decided to focus on different aspects of the resolution. It has 4 pillars. It has a pillar of participation, a pillar of protection, a pillar of recovery and resilience, and a pillar of prevention. And here in Moldova, I think a big focus has been placed on participation, which is a very important pillar of the resolution. Participation of women in, as I said, all processes of peacemaking, peace building, and security. And here we talk about including participation of women in formal political structures, such as the parliament, such as the local government, such as the executive branch of the government, the judiciary, also the participation of women in the security sector, both the army, military, and also the police, in those sectors that are supposed to give security to the citizens. As you know, Moldova has adopted a national action plan on Resolution 1325 earlier this year, and that brings Moldova closer to other countries in the region that already had such action plans. They are now in the 2nd or even 3rd generation of action plans. Moldova adopted this important action plan in March this year, and now we have supported as UN Women the process of elaboration of this national action plan. Now we are very much looking into the implementation, because I think one of the challenges in our country here, also in countries of the region, is that we do make commitments, there are policies, there are strategies, but they're not really implemented, and there is also not a lot of financial allocations to the implementation of these policies and strategies. So it is very important that all the responsible institutions that have been indicated in this action plan really take it seriously and implement their obligations. And it is also very important that civil society is involved in this process, and civil society was active in the development of the action plan. Now they have to be very active, and they are active in really monitoring the implementation of the action plan and bringing the civil society perspective to it. But I also want to mention that in this broader understanding of peace and security, what we have found is that gender equality is a precondition for peaceful societies. There is a very strong correlation between how gender equal a society is and how peaceful a society is. And we have found, there is a lot of recent research that has found that those countries that have higher levels of gender equality in political life, in economic life, in social life, are actually more peaceful and resort to less use of force in their relations to other states. And gender equality and peacefulness come hand in hand. So there is a lot of benefit to investing in gender equality in a country in terms of creating peaceful, socially cohesive, societies that are less likely to get into a conflict or to resort to violence as a means of conflict resolution. So investment in gender equality is not only the right thing to do, it's also the smart thing to do. And in addition to the National Action Plan, there are two more important policy commitments of the government of Moldova that we have also been involved in, and UN Women is supporting in terms of the implementation. This is the gender equality strategy of the Republic of Moldova, which was adopted last year, and also the very recently adopted national strategy to prevent and combat violence against women and domestic violence. Because violence against women is often actually closely connected to conflict, and it can be one of those indicators when we see increase in violence at home, for example. It can be an indicator for escalation of violence outside of the home as well. So we really are focusing on implementation and ensuring that these commitments do not stay on paper, but they benefit the citizens of Moldova.
Dacă îmi permiteți, dumneavoastră ați menționat mai multe subiecte pe care eu le consider a fi foarte importante, dar eu aș atrage atenția la două dintre ele, și anume la faptul că dumneavoastră v-ați referit la modul în care a evoluat conceptul de securitate și anume la faptul că există și latura umană a conceptului de securitate. Dacă ați putea să ne spuneți în ce constă această latură umană a conceptului de securitate și la rolul pe care le au anume femeile în zonele post-conflict. În cazul Republicii Moldova ar fi zona de securitate, de exemplu, una dintre ele. Iar al doilea subiect s-a referit la acele instituții, dar și societatea civilă, acei actori care trebuie să promoveze agenda de pace și securitate în Republica Moldova, și dacă ați putea să dezvoltați un pic mai mult care ar fi rolul lor, astfel încât să avem o agendă care se desfășoară pe deplin și este implementată pe deplin în același timp.
Women have always participated as agents of peace, if I may say that, but very often their role has been invisible or unrecognized or in the informal community level, less so in the formal political processes. And I think in the case of Moldova, where we talk about women's role in ensuring communities come together and communities, there is building of bridges between communities, this is a very essential role that women have played, that they are playing, that they will continue playing. This is not very often, as I said, seen. It often remains invisible, and it's not part of the formal talks, peace talks, but it is essential, because in this way we create societies that speak, that are basically socially cohesive. And this we call track 2 negotiations, actually. In the track 2 negotiations, where you have this informal community level confidence building type of dialogue going on, this as well is extremely essential for building of a peaceful society. And this has often, I can tell you from my experience in the Balkan region, for example, that even in the worst periods of the war, of the Yugoslav war, women from the Kosovo and Serbian side, they continued talking, they continued being in touch, they continued working under the radar in order to maintain the dialogue and to maintain the possibility for peace being reached sooner and for the conflict to be ended, for the violent conflict to be ended. So this is a very essential role, and in fact Security Council Resolution 1325 aims specifically also at that, to enlarge the concept of peacemaking, to enlarge the concept of who are those peace builders, who are those people that make peace happen. It's not only those that are involved in the formal negotiations, where the role of women is also very important, and we have to make sure they are sitting on those tables, decision-making, track 1 negotiation tables as well, but also at the level of societies and at the level of intra-household, intercommunal relations, because the only way for us to move forward is to maintain those human-to-human, to build this human security through this kind of dialogue. So it is really essential, and I hope that it gets more and more recognized in the future, the role of women. In terms of civil society, they are a very important stakeholder, and very often the push for the implementation of the Security Council resolution commitments on women, peace and security have come from civil society. If it hasn't been for the active role of civil society, it would have probably taken much longer, and we don't know what would have actually happened in many countries. But civil society, and specifically human rights activists, women's rights activists, have really brought this to the forefront of the decision makers and policy makers and to their attention. They have a critical role as watchdogs to keep the government accountable, to make sure that the commitments are really implemented, and to bring the voices of the women, of the people who are usually not heard and not seen to the decision-making table. And here it's not just women as a whole, but there are specific groups of women that are even more excluded. And here we are talking about women from ethnic minority groups, women with disabilities, women that have suffered violence. Very often those are even more invisible, and their priorities, their voice has to come forward. Civil society can play a critical role to make that happen. In terms of the government responsibilities, the National Action Plan of the Republic of Moldova specifies a number of institutions that have concrete roles and obligations and responsibilities. We are working with many of them. This includes the Ministry of Interior with various subordinate structures, the Ministry of Defense. This includes the Bureau for Integration, which has an overall coordination role of the NAP implementation, of the Action Plan implementation. This also includes Ministry of Justice, Ministry of Labor, Health and Social Policy. Each of these ministries has their own responsibilities. We are encouraged to see that some of them have already taken steps and have developed their own individual action plans. Now, as I said, the implementation has to follow, and this ambitious plan has to be implemented.
Bineînțeles că trebuie să fie implementat, dar trebuie să existe și resurse, să fie alocate resurse pentru ca acesta să fie implementat cu succes. Aș vrea să vă întreb una dintre întrebările de final deja, dacă ați putea să-mi spuneți care este rolul bărbaților în agenda aceasta de promovare a femeilor, a domeniului de femei, pace și securitate.
The role of the men is also very, very important. This is an agenda that benefits all of society, not only women and not only girls. And I think that having peaceful, democratic and developed societies where human rights are respected for all is in the benefit and in the interest of men as well. And I think that many men can, who have actually had experience in, for example, peace negotiations or being in decision-making positions, will tell you that when women are participating, when women are equally in the decision-making process, the quality of decision-making is improved because women bring a different perspective, women have additional issues that they bring to the table, and they're also, this diversity in taking decisions is something that any kind of governance process needs. So men decision-makers have a very important role to play in ensuring that women's voices are not just taken into account in a very symbolic or superficial way, but there is an equal weight which is given to women and men. And men as a whole in society, I think, have to also recognize, and we see increasingly more and more men that are stepping up under many of our campaigns. For example, we have a He for She campaign, which is about male champions for gender equality, but also other campaigns where we work, for example, with business leaders, CEOs of companies who are men, who are basically saying, this is not about half of the population, this is about the entire population. This is about building a fairer, more equal society where everyone is more free to also express who they are, to be free of stereotypes, to be free of restrictions, and to really live their life in the way that they want and for the well-being of everyone.
Și doar o întrebare de final, dacă ați putea să ne vorbiți în câteva cuvinte despre viitoarele activități pe care UN Women ar dori să le întreprindă în Republica Moldova.
We are in a very exciting stage of our programming here in Moldova. As I said, we just launched our new 5-year program and strategy for the country. We have expanded a lot the partnerships that we have with government institutions and civil society organizations. We will be working more and more at the local level in different communities of Moldova. We will be working more and more with young people, going into schools, into universities, in order to really engage them more in this building this kind of equal, gender equal society. So I hope that you will all join us. We also are going to be working more with media, because media as well has a very important role. In order to, our goal is really that in few years Moldova is an example for other countries in the region, and all the commitments that have been made are actually become a reality for women and men and girls and boys in this country.
Doamna Varbanova, vă mulțumesc foarte mult și, într-adevăr, TVR Moldova va fi prezent și, sigur, va promova agenda de femei, pace și securitate, dar și alte activități pe care UN Women le va face în Republica Moldova. Vă mulțumesc foarte mult!
Vă mulțumesc foarte mult!